Good morning and welcome to episode 91 of the Jaguar Report podcast. My name's Gus Logue, joined as always by my co-host, Mr. John Shipley. Woo!
Yeah, I'm a mister now.
Yeah, the Mr.
Yeah. I'm actually taking her name.
Oh yeah, is that right?
No.
No.
We're not a progressive family around here. No, but I appreciate it, buddy. I missed you. I'll say it. I spent the whole honeymoon in Bahamas talking about podcasting with you. Can you believe it?
Not surprised.
Yeah, no. But I'm good to be back talking Jaguars, man. It was definitely weird. I was at a Senior Frogs in Nassau, Bahamas, watching combine press conferences, and it's you don't get how absurd the combine is until you're sipping on a yard-long daiquiri, listening to Trent Baalke taking 10-year-old Jim Harbaugh questions. There's
so many Harbaugh questions. It wasn't.
It was a press conference of great bits and deleted quotes. I'll say that much.
Well, John, you look great. You look red and tan, and
I always look red.
Congrats again to you and the missus. So yeah, I can't believe it's 6 days ago from the day we're recording this that Baalke and Peterson talked at the combine. We were talking before. It feels like it was months ago, but should we start there, or do you want to start with some Ridley stuff?
Hey man, we honestly have a lot to go over. You know, this might be a lengthy one. So right. You know, I got my list right here. Let's go ahead and just talk about like the most recent stuff. Obviously, two important things have happened today, you know, for the Jaguars as of this recording. The first one is Mike Evans signed a 2-year, $52 million contract with Tampa Bay. It's hilarious that his agent said he wants to play with an elite quarterback and an elite defense and re-ups with Baker Mayfield, which shows you that the only thing that people actually care about is getting paid. You know, he could care less. Other than playing with the Panthers, he just wanted to get paid. That's what I got from that quote. Now, why does that have Jaguar implications? Obviously, Calvin Ridley. You know, I mean, it's kind of like you mentioned it before the show. It's kind of shocking how many people are just now catching up to the situation the Jaguars are in. Now, I'll say my prediction is still that the Jaguars re-sign Ridley. I think that there's a ton of reasons why Ridley himself would want to be back. A ton of reasons the Jaguars will, you know, obviously want him back. And it's not like that's a rumor that the Jaguars want him back. I feel like they say it every single chance they get that they, you know, want to resign him. I still think that they're going to work with him toward a deal that they can agree to sometime after the March 13th deadline. Doesn't mean they agree to one with him, because obviously the reason why the Mike Evans thing matters is that now Ridley's probably a top free agent wide receiver on the market. Even if Michael Pittman doesn't get tagged, I think Ridley will be the top free agent. People have been saying maybe Marquise Brown. Ridley's going to get a bigger deal either with the Jaguars on free agency than Marquise Brown will. And I mean, Jeremy Fowler just a few days ago had a report that teams around the league view Ridley as a potentially, you know, elite talent. He said he probably will get a bag, and there's a lot of reasons to think why. You know, I mean, he's 29 years old. He just put up 1,000 yards after not playing for a year and a half. I know Jaguars fans have. It's funny how everybody who went from being disappointed in Ridley and hating how much of the offense went through him are now panicking. Oh, you mean Parker Washington?
Yeah, they're like, I didn't stop to think and imagine what it would look like without him on the field.
It's actually bad to lose good football players.
Crazy.
And that's the thing, man. Ridley's a good football player. Is he a dominant number one? I mean, probably not, but how many of those are in the NFL? It's not a knock to say he's not Justin Jefferson. He's not Tyreek Hill. He's still a really good receiver. Mm-hmm. The Jaguars are still much better with him than without him. But, I mean, chances are once March 11th hits, teams are going to be calling him and offering him some like ludicrous, you know, numbers. Of course, the Jaguars will have that 2-day period where teams can talk to him but can't sign him to try to figure something out. That's probably when a lot of groundwork will be done, I'd imagine, because that's when they'll know what really they're working with. But obviously Evans not hitting free agency is a big thing. Yeah, Evans was probably like I would imagine the league would be split on how many teams would have Evans number one and Ridley number one because they're two different guys.
Yeah, it depends on fits.
Exactly. But I mean, I'd imagine a lot of teams would have been gunning, for Evans. I mean, just what's your read on all of that and on the situation? And for the record, I am taking my victory lap on the pick compensation thing after the general manager literally acknowledged it at the podium.
Right.
Take that away.
I would still expect for Ridley to stay with the team, so I'm giving the same prediction as you. And I don't know. It definitely seems a little bit scratchier now that Evans is off the market because I think Ridley is not just the best free agent wide receiver in this class or this year, but for the past like maybe 5 years because NFL teams just like don't let good players in general, but especially wide receivers hit the open market. Like even like a guy like Michael Pittman is more of a good, not great player, but the Colts aren't going to like risk losing him get away. And the Jaguars certainly wouldn't have risked letting Ridley walk away if they weren't already dealing with like the Josh Allen contract situation.
That's so good.
I think it's worth mentioning that I think T. Higgins is still kind of available because they traded him they tagged him really early. And I think usually when a player gets tagged really early, it's like, okay, like we don't feel great about like extension talks. So we're kind of like putting it out there to the league that this guy is available. Like similar to L'Jarius Sneed, where like everyone is acknowledging that L'Jarius Sneed is like a trade candidate for the Chiefs because he got tagged. And I think it's the same for Higgins. And Higgins is probably a better receiver and obviously a younger receiver, but teams I think are going to be much more willing to like try to pay Calvin Ridley and try to like win that war rather than like giving up a second round pick and then having to hand T. Higgins a massive extension. So even if T. Higgins is a better player, I think Ridley is the best like option on the market right now. And I think you had an interesting note in your combine piece where you got some scoop and one scout said to you, or maybe it was an executive, someone said to you that they wouldn't be surprised if teams like kind of drive up the asking price for Ridley because they're like still a little bit upset about what happened with Kirk a couple years ago. And basically what happened with that is that, again, teams don't let good receivers hit the open market. And so when Kirk, who's a solid receiver, like did hit the open market, Jags overpaid him to make sure he came into the building. And so now it's interesting, like what 2-3 off seasons later, we could kind of see it come back to bite them maybe.
Fans have absolutely hated that comment. I've wanted to make clear, one, I didn't say it, but two, people are like, would teams really be that petty to talk about money with a guy if they don't like just to like spite somebody? Yes. Yes. They and that doesn't mean like you're offering him a contract and saying, sign this, but I mean, you can talk to him and like express like what potential numbers might look like. So when he comes back to the Jags, that price is going up. And Jags fans love to say that now that the Kirk deal looks good now, etc. That's a different argument entirely, which obviously isn't rooted in much fact to begin with. But we've literally Tyreek Hill got traded because of the Christian Kirk deal. I mean, literally Tyreek Hill has said that he saw Christian Kirk, who he's complimented as a receiver, but he saw him get paid and was like, no, I can't be playing on my current deal. So there's been several other instances
Same
like
with
that.
Devontae Adams.
Yeah. So for people to think that other teams don't remember that, it's ludicrous. I mean, yeah, is it petty? Absolutely. But the NFL's petty. The Jaguars have been petty before. I mean, and if there was a popularity contest, it's not like the Jags GM would be taking home, gold or silver or bronze or an assortment of other medals. I mean, this is a GM who last year openly said that they tried to trade up time and time again in the draft, and teams said no. And there's a reason teams say no,
For sure. I think there's two good like points for Ridley staying in town though, and one is that he grew up in Broward County in the Fort Lauderdale area, about 4 hours away from Jacksonville. And the Buccaneers and the Dolphins, the other two Florida NFL teams, aren't really in a position to add a wide receiver. And then he also said at locker room cleanup the Monday after week 18 that he doesn't really feel like learning like new people and new playbooks and stuff like that. And so
as long as the money's right.
Yeah, as long as the money's right.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe some team will offer him $30 million a year, but assuming like the money is like relatively the same, he would certainly rather stay close to home and stay with a team that he's kind of gotten used to over the past year.
So the scout I talked to predicted $17 million a year, which is around the Christian Kirk range. I'd imagine it's been 2 years since Kirk got paid. The cap's gone up. That he'd be closer, I think, to $20 million. After Mike Evans,
yeah, woo,
23
contract for Mike Evans.
Yeah.
I mean, he deserves it, but
Yeah.
it's a bigger number than I was expecting.
After Evans deal, what do you think Ridley would be looking at? I think like 23, 24 million per year in the open market, if not rising above that. Like,
yeah, I was definitely thinking before like 17 or 18 for like 2 or 3 seasons might make sense, and like maybe he would sniff 20 a year. But now it's like I feel like he's going to go over 20 a year, and it's going to end up like landing at 21-ish.
For the record, I'm an idiot. I definitely said during the season last year, no, I don't think Ridley's price will be that high. I think teams will be wary, etc. It clearly is not the case. Like, there are clearly going to be teams interested. I mean, just look at all the teams that like need a receiver: the Giants, the Patriots, the Panthers. God help him. For him, that's not the route he goes. But I mean, the Falcons, I've pretty much openly said they want to add another receiver across from Drake London. The Chiefs are obviously, people to watch. The Titans. It seems like the Rams are sniffing around on wide receivers a lot.
Yeah, I did see that the Rams were interested in Evans.
The Arizona Cardinals could be, even another one. There's a lot of teams that need, receiver help this year. So I was a moron, for that. But with that said, yeah, I'll also say, to Ridley's comments that you mentioned in the locker room, in my time, like covering players in the NFL, he's probably one of the most honest, if not the most honest, in interviews. Like he literally says exactly, at least I think, what he's thinking, and nothing. Like, it doesn't even go through a filter. It's just like he says it how it is. So when he says stuff like that, I believe him. Like, to me, that says I prefer to be back in Jacksonville, but they obviously can't lowball me.
I even think that, like, at the beginning of that, like, little media availability at his locker, that he was like trying to play it coy at first and being like, oh, I don't know, like the money has to be right, like I'd like to be back, but like we'll kind of see. And then after like the second or third question is like when he finally sort of let it slip that like I don't really feel like learning other stuff. Not trying to like, I don't know, say he doesn't feel like learning. I don't want to like the quote to come out wrong, but like,
no, I mean, it's understandable. He doesn't want to learn a new situation. I mean, he knows the people, he knows the quarterback, he knows the coach, he knows the scheme, etc.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd even say if you're the Jaguars, you think about paying him, are you already factoring in a boost in production? Because I would think it'd be natural to, his second year with Lawrence, another year back into the swing of things. I think he obviously not playing for a year and a half probably impacted him, more than maybe people would have expected, like more than I would have expected going into the season. I mean, do you factor that into it? Because, of course, there's a chance maybe he doesn't improve,
I mean, I think everyone and their brother should definitely like expect for improvement next year, especially because I think like obviously he had a really nice week 1 game against the Colts, but then after that I feel like that was a nice showing, but then after that I feel like he was kind of like getting forced targets a little bit more, mostly because of the Zay Jones injury, and like all of a sudden Ridley was the only capable player that they could line up outside, and they had like a lot of like kind of like short options between ETN and Kirk and Engram, but then like suddenly there was just a lot on Ridley's plate. So I think assuming like the receiver room is kind of healthier and like more rounded out next season, but even without that, like just knocking off the rust, I think he'll be better. But
yeah,
I mean, that's all in my opinion. You'd have to ask the negotiator, because we both said that we think that Balky will look at Josh Allen's 2023 season and be like, that's great and all, but let's see you do it again. So I almost feel like wouldn't he have the same approach to Ridley? Like that was an impressive comeback, but like let's see you, like it was cool that you played 17 games. Let's see you do it again.
It really is a good bit to say, okay, prove it after your prove it year. Just say that loud as like going back like last year. They're like, no, we're not going to pay you, Josh. Prove it. Proves it. Let's see it. Let's see it again.
I also love his bit of like being in discussions with like every interesting name. Like there's been Danielle Hunter rumors for over a year now. The Jags, I don't know whether like we said it specifically, but like on the Mike Evans front, someone I think it might have been Rossini.
Diana Rossini.
Yeah, she said that the Jaguars were like one of 7 or 8 teams that she listed that were like keeping an eye on Evans in free agency. There was smoke about Hassan Reddick trade that the Jags were linked to in the past week. There was smoke about the Jags trading up for Roma Dunze in the draft. So like there's all these fun possibilities that the Jags don't actually ever carry out. And so I think that's a great bit is that they're like so close and that Baki can be like, oh, well, we were interested, but it just wasn't the right price.
Same thing happened with Amari Cooper.
Yeah.
That? Yeah. And it kind of in hindsight, they definitely should have just paid that money and traded for Amari Cooper. But
yes,
nonetheless, yeah, you're right. It definitely feels like they've been connected to every big name. It feels like Dave Caldwell is the general manager again. And it's like 2015 where every of the top 10 free agent lists, you just know the Jags are naturally going to be like connected to some of them.
True.
Let's talk about some of those. All right, let's start with Mike Evans. What do you make of that tweet? It surprised me because I mean it's natural for the Jaguars like to be high on a dude like Evans. They one of the best receivers in the NFL. They don't have anybody like him, but they're actively trying to pay Calvin Ridley. So I mean,
right.
Was your read of that just they would have been interested in Mike Evans if Calvin Ridley signed elsewhere?
Exactly. That's my exact read. Is that I think there's like 0 universes, and that Ridley and Mike Evans and Christian Kirk were all Jaguars in 2024. Like that.
And Zay Jones.
And Zay Jones. Yeah, that's an outrageous number or outrageous amount of cash to be handing to one position group, even if it is like an important and a fun position like wide receivers. Like that's just a complete overload of resource allocations. And so I think the plan was always like, we want Ridley. Ridley's definitely our guy. But if we happen to get outbid and if Mike Evans happens to be available, then we would kind of pivot from Ridley to Evans. But again, I think there's no way Evans and Ridley would have been on the same team.
Okay, so let's kind of go from that perspective. So say obviously Evans isn't an option now, but Jaguars go into free agency. Calvin Ridley signs with Kansas City Chiefs, whoever. Who would you pivot to in free agency in that scenario? I know some of the names out there aren't great. I like Josh Reynolds is one name being thrown out there, and a lot of the names just sound like Marvin Jones to me again, which is a point I tried to make. I wanted to make earlier. I've had some people say to me like, well, they were fine on offense with Marvin Jones a year ago and not Calvin Ridley. Ridley just produced way more than Marvin Jones in the same spot. The difference in the Jaguars offense is that Christian Kirk missed 6 games and Zay Jones only played 9 as opposed to the year before where each of them missed 1 game combined. Calvin Ridley is obviously better than Marvin Jones. The Jaguars offense was not better because of Marvin Jones is a better receiver than Calvin Ridley or something like that. So who would you pivot to? Because a lot of the names on there just like brings me back to when Marvin was their starting receiver in 2022 and just being like, wow, that is a completely useless spot.
Yeah. I mean, I would pivot to the draft because I think like we saw the Chiefs and the Packers both like trade away a superstar receiver and then like address it. A better example would be the Titans trading away AJ Brown and then immediately selecting Treylon Burks to replace him. So that one obviously didn't work out very well. And even like the Vikings actually kind of started the trend by trading away Stephon Diggs to the Bills and then drafting Justin Jefferson. And so I think the reason all this stuff is happening is because of the market where the receivers are earning so much in free agency that like it makes a little more sense to just get like a guy that's cost controlled for 4 to 6 years on a rookie deal. And especially since like receivers a position that typically like, even if like receivers prime isn't during their rookie years, like they're still very productive typically during their rookie contract years. So I would like if Ridley signed somewhere else, even with like the knowledge that they were interested in Mike Evans, I think they should like sign a Josh Reynolds or a Kendrick Bourne or like a mid-level Marvin Jones type guy to just fill out their room and make sure that Parker Washington isn't wide receiver 4. And then you draft a receiver top 50. That'd be my plan.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I like that you mentioned like the market. It's stupid, right? That the Jaguars, if they pay Ridley, which they probably should do, that all three of their starting receivers are like high paid veterans, right?
Yeah.
Am I wrong in thinking that like in today's NFL, that's kind of like a horrible way to build like an offense?
Yeah, and then like they like got cheap guys last year, but it was a 6th-rounder and an undrafted free agent. Like even if they don't spend a top 50 pick on a receiver this year, like regardless, even so, let's say Ridley comes back and signs with the Jaguars, I would still want them to take a receiver in the top 100, even if they have Kirk, Ridley, and Zay Jones on the roster for 2024.
They probably should have taken a receiver instead of Walker Little in hindsight, huh?
Yeah.
Like the receivers there weren't great. Rondale Moore, Dwayne Eskridge, Tutu Atwell, Terrace Marshall, Nico Collins was available, but he went and like picked like 89 or something like that. But it just seems like there's been several points since 2021, Gus, where me and you have both said, oh, you could see a receiver here, and it hasn't happened. The only receivers they've drafted are Jalen Camp, who never actually spent a second on the regular season roster for a team, let alone played it down. Like he wasn't even on the practice squad. They cut him and he signed with Houston. And of course, Parker Washington, who he's a 6th-round receiver. He's a little bit better than his draft slot, I'd say, but it's not. They didn't take like the next star or anything.
Yeah, and the problem with Washington is that like I think he's only gonna succeed if Christian Kirk gets hurt. Like that's his only path to like a significant amount of playing time and production is if Kirk is not on the field.
Yeah, and did you listen to Doug Peterson with his like 4-minute thing with Matthew Berry?
Yeah.
When he was asked about like where's Christian Kirk best, and he was pretty adamant. He's like slot. So I'm like still like even Kirk, like even best case Parker Washington, like you said, can only play the Kirk role. That's still only the slot, like just how valuable, really is that. All right.
The good news is that I think there's a lot of like X type receivers in this upcoming class, and so even if they don't get like Keon Coleman in the first 2 rounds, I think there's still like a good amount of like big bodies. I feel like the receiver classes in recent years have kind of like churned out a lot of like small slot types.
Oh, yeah.
I think this year is kind of like almost a little bit of a rebound in terms of getting like bigger receivers in the class, which is good news for the Jags.
Let's see. The receivers the Jags passed to trade up for Devin Lloyd. So it's like basically so Christian Watson, Wan'Dale Robinson, John Mechie, Tyquan Thornton, George Pickens, Alec Pierce, and Sky Moore. They probably should have just picked like George Pickens instead of trading up for a linebacker, huh?
Right. At the same time, though, like this is the only like exciting receiver that you just named.
Yeah, there's been a lot of bad receivers drafted high in the last couple of years. Yeah. All right. Let's go ahead and move on to that next rumor that you mentioned. Hassan Reddick, Mike Smith of, the Fan Nation's Cowboys site. Not Mike Smith. Jesus. Singing of the old Falcons coach. Mike Fisher. Sorry. The Fish. Yeah. Fisher's a long time Cowboys beat guy, before we were born, long time. Mm. So somebody replied to me and said shit bomb. I tweeted that out. I'm like, no, that's why report is in the headline. It's right. Somebody else. Yeah. So it came from Mike Fisher. He said the Jaguars and the Cowboys are 2 teams interested in trading for Hassan Reddick. I have nothing on that. I asked around and I got basically a shrug. I don't know anything about that. So I don't think that's anything impending or anything like that. But just what was your gut reaction to that? Mine was that I don't really see it. I don't really see how it fits. The only scenario I'd see where it would fit is they were tagging and trading Josh Allen. And normally when I feel like teams are making it obvious, like you mentioned with T. Higgins, other tagging trades, the Jags with Ngakoue in 2020, the most obvious tag and trade in NFL history.
Yeah.
I wouldn't imagine the Jaguars would do Josh Allen. I think it probably would piss a lot of people off if they did.
Yeah.
What was your reaction to
that? It doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense, fit-wise, I feel like, especially because, first of all, you already have, your weak side linebacker in Josh Allen. And so, even if, somehow Josh Allen isn't a Jaguar in 2024, I think it would make way more sense for them to like just pick an edge in the first round in April rather than like being like, oh no, we're not going to give Josh Allen a lot of money, but Hassan Reddick, yeah, come on down. We got a lot of money for you. I don't know, like Reddick was a interesting prospect or just player in general because he started out as an off-ball linebacker, and then when he was with the Cardinals at the beginning of his year, he kind of transitioned more into an edge player, and it really clicked for him when he signed after he signed his first free agent contract in Carolina. And so I was a fan of Reddick as like a upswing free agent signing in like 2020 or whenever that was when he was leaving the Cardinals. But now, like I think he's like already at his peak, and like you'd be trading away, like I don't know his trade value. I feel like is not very high because like he's already
his cap number is crazy, and that's why he's talked about being traded. Like to begin with, like his cap number is crazy. It's like he'd be, I'm pretty sure, either the highest paid player or the second highest paid player after Christian Kirk in terms of cap.
So it doesn't make sense financially, and then it just doesn't make sense on the field either because, like, I don't know, he's not a very big player. He's kind of like a tweener type edge. And so I like clearly Balky and Nielsen both love like big hulking edges, like a Calais Campbell even.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, it's not Madden. I don't think you're going to make Trayvon Walker a 3-tech. And I feel like people misconceive the whole Trayvon should play inside more. Like Trayvon should play inside more and like passing downs, and get mismatches with guards. He shouldn't be playing defensive tackle. Am I wrong? And I feel like that's what a lot of people like responded to at the Reddick thing was like, oh, they can just do that and then move Trayvon inside. Well,
yeah. I did have to think about it for a second because like Trayvon, like with his hand in the dirt at all times, like he would definitely like be a great run defender from the interior, but I think he would be more valuable to continue being a run defender from like that Sam position as the strong side edge. That's such like a undervalued or at least underappreciated role is to be able to like have one guy at that spot and just set the edge for you. It makes life for all the other 10 run defenders makes their life a lot easier.
100%. All right, let's move on to the next one. Danielle Hunter. I feel like the Danielle Hunter smoke is the biggest bulky ball of all time. I think I wrote that like it's like the itch they just can't scratch. Like they cannot get the Danielle Hunter rumors the hell out of Jacksonville. It feels like it's never coming from Jacksonville either, dude. It's coming from like Minnesota. Their beat writer with The Athletic said it first. So let's go way back. It was obviously a thing last year, last summer. The Jaguars were definitely in talks with Minnesota about Danielle Hunter. That was reported last summer during training camp. Then a long-time Minnesota sports guy last regular season said Jaguars were still interested in him. Fast forward to this spring, the Athletics beat reporter for the Vikings has listed them as a potential destination if he's not still with the Vikings. And then their play-by-play announcer, Paul Allen, said he thinks it's Minnesota or Jacksonville. What is going on?
Yeah. I also know that ESPN's Jeremy Fowler has like made the connection multiple times.
Yeah, he said the same thing like a month ago too. So it's like it's not dating back from the rumors last year. It's like all new things. So
it's like hell is going on? Just a little hole in Minnesota that people are getting their information. It's like clearly at the top with like ESPN and national reporters too. And it's been over a year, maybe a little less than a year, but it feels like it's been a decade.
I'm trying to think of the last player linked to the Jaguars this often. It's tough, man.
Even like draft picks and stuff, like because usually it's the opposite, where it's like you don't want to show your cards and you're trying to like keep your favorite guys under wraps so that no other team knows. So like I feel like this is like the first time ever that a player has been linked so much, especially like for a star player too. Like he's got multiple Pro Bowls under his belt, and he's, I mean, like maybe 30 years old now. So it's not like you're going to be acquiring Nick Bosa, but it's not a small deal.
So what's your read on it? Would it make sense? I'd imagine you'd have to still give up a first for Danielle Hunter, man. Like I know he's getting old, but it's years of production. Pro Bowl player,
right?
Yes,
I'm pretty sure he had a no tag clause in his contract. Actually,
yeah. So I'm talking out of my ass. So
no,
I'd imagine last year it would have cost. Yeah, last year would have cost the first for Danielle Hunter. Okay, so what does a contract look like for Danielle Hunter? It's probably close to $30 million a year. People don't want to accept this, but with the cap going up, pass rushers is going to get paid near Nick Bosa money, dude.
No, it's like Nick Bosa is $34 million, and then the next highest.
No, I think he's the highest.
Hunter? No, I'm
No,
saying Bosa is
yeah. Bosa's the highest. Yeah.
So I can't remember who is the second highest paid edge on average, but I know that whoever it is making $28 million per year. So I would certainly yeah, probably. And then what did Sweat get? Like 24 per year because it was 96 over 4 years. So
okay, yeah. So it is like Nick Bosa at 34, TJ Watt at 28, Joey Bosa at 27, which what the hell? Myles Garrett at 25, and then Montez Sweat at 24 and a half.
I think he's gonna fall in between. Like I think he'll get like 28. Honestly,
28. So TJ Watt money more or less.
Yeah, only because like I'm not too concerned about like his age, but more so just his injury history because he's been fairly clean for the past 2 seasons, I think, but he's had like at least 2, if not 3, major season-ending injuries before in his career, and so like you would prefer not to give $30 million per year to a 30-year-old with injury history, regardless of the position he plays.
Yeah,
I think it makes a little bit more sense in that he's like has kind of like the size requirements to be an edge player, like more so than Hassan Reddick. I think he just like would fit Nielsen's and Balky's vision a little bit more.
He seems like a bulky type of player,
right? I think he's been crazy productive, and like we've heard or we've kind of like joked about that in the past couple of podcasts about how Balky is like, oh, Josh Allen like had 17.5 sacks last season, which is great, but why didn't you get at least a dozen sacks every year of your career? And that's like something that Danielle Hunter has pretty much done. He's been racking up sacks since he was a rookie. And so I think Balky especially would just really value that pass production.
Yeah.
I guess the fact that he's like older makes him like a little bit of a better like buy low because like obviously you're gonna like he's gonna earn less year to year than Josh Allen, assuming that they both sign like long-term deals this year. And so maybe Balky is kind of thinking that it's like a buy low situation, at least relatively.
So here's the age that all these guys were when they signed their big deals. Nick Bosa was 25, Watt was 26, Joey Bosa was 25, Garrett was 24, Montez Sweat was 27. He's the only one. And then Hunter's a couple years older. And you'd have like the last like player Hunter's age to be paid big money at that position was Trey Hendrickson and Von Miller's kind of absurd contract. So there's, I guess, a little bit of precedence for it, but they can't tag Josh Allen and sign Danielle Hunter, can they? I know there's always money in the banana stand, but could they do it?
No, I feel like this is probably like a Ridley Evans situation where they're just like been doing a ton of homework on Hunter so that they're like, if like for some reason like Josh is like not a Jaguar, then like Hunter is going to be our first call to replace him.
That makes sense. Ah, man.
Because there are a lot of, like you said, like it doesn't make sense to make Trayvon a full-time player inside. Like Balky, like we should talk this
even in a fourth
later, but Balky said at the combine that like Trayvon will probably line up a little bit more inside. But like as you said, that should be like on third downs and on like clear pass rushing downs. He shouldn't be like a full-time 5 technique. And so
100%. All right, Gus, we're gonna break real quick for ads and we'll be right back. We got a lot more to talk about, so don't go away. And we're back. Episode 91, Gus. Who would have thought?
9 more until the big one.
Dude, I was like save the 100th one for like something good. I want ice sculptures. I want a one-man band. I want the works.
You're like biggest events of my year. Number 1, 100th episode. Number 2, marriage.
Yeah, number 1, 100th episode. Number 2, 99th episode. Number 3. No, now, can we talk about the top 100 moments in Jaguar Report podcast history?
Has there been that many?
Yes.
I mean, I've probably gotten balky ball that many times by now, so you could just
Yeah. See, the bulky ball doesn't work as much when things aren't going good. So they started losing, and I was like,
people are already at a low, just hammer.
yeah, it went from people thought it was a good bit, and now people get pissed. So
Yeah,
we gotta let it simmer, make
less
it
than a
come
little
back.
bit. No, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
All right. So we talked about Ridley. Let's talk about the other massive free agent. It's terrific that they have 2 major free agents, and
I thought you said massive free agent.
that too.
Massive.
And as of this recording, neither is like signing anything imminently.
No.
Josh Allen. So the tag deadline is almost 24 hours from now. It wouldn't surprise me if he was tagged sometime later today, sometime tomorrow. I feel like they've already put that parting shot out that he's going to get tagged if no deal is done. He said he's going to be a Jaguar, which it's the same thing. He said the same thing about Evan Ingram last year at the Combine, the Cameron Wolf. He said Evan's going to be a Jaguar one way or another. It's basically the same thing. I don't envision there's much ambiguity there. Obviously, the ideal scenario would have been you have a deal done with Josh Allen. You're able to tag Calvin Ridley, pay him, $21 million, I think is the wide receiver cap number, which seems about what he's going to get paid anyways.
Right.
And you don't lose either one of them. They're not going to lose Josh Allen. Yeah, there's not going to be a scenario where Josh Allen they're going to let just walk away. They're not going to operate like that. I think they have at least a elementary understanding of the economics of player value, and to not let a young pass rusher who just put up numbers like that leave for absolutely nothing. So that's not going to happen. What do you see happening with the Allen scenario? I've said for a while, I think they're going to try to sign him to something by July, and then go from there. I'm not positive they get something done even by July, but Trent has at least made it clear that he's trying. And to God, he's trying. I'm meeting with his agent, whatever, this week he said so.
Right.
He's trying. That doesn't mean they're close. I don't feel like they're that close. Now, the fact that I said that, he's probably going to sign a deal in the next hour or so.
Yeah.
What's your read on that situation? I mean, my stance has been long that if you weren't going to pay him last year, which you probably could have got him for under $25 million per year last year, maybe you could have even gotten him for 22, 23 million per year.
Literally, even if you signed him last year to 28 million a year, that's looking fine right now.
You have to project the cap's going up. Obviously, it went more people expected, but you have to project it's going up. And the fact that all the data said he was due for a giant season sooner than later. He was top 10 in true pass rush win rate. I think top 5 in 2022. He had a really good season in 2022, even though he didn't have double-digit sacks. They definitely should have paid him in October when Rashawn Gary and Montez Sweat got paid. They didn't. They started negotiations when they did. What's your read on it?
I think my expectation right now is that a deal does not get done by July or even the start of the regular season. I think they're gonna try to get him to play on the tag because I think nothing Balky's mind has been kind of made up, and there's not really going to be anything to make him change his mind unless I don't know, Josh's agent ends up taking less than what they originally wanted or something like that. But I feel like the whole time it's been this oh, he had a nice year last year, and I mean, to play devil's advocate, the thing I just said 3 seconds ago. If they had signed him to 28 million a year last year, that would have looked good in retrospect. But at the same time, it was fair not to give him that big of a deal because no one would have expected that he was going to break the franchise single season record for sacks. But at the same time, like you said, it was kind of expected, and it was the kind of growth where all right, he's not going to jump up from and get an additional 10 sacks in 2024 like he did in 2023. But it was a kind of improvement that was clear player improvement, not just statistical improvement. And so I think there's Like he's not going to get 17 and a half sacks again last year because sacks are kind of hard to come by. But I think you can definitely be confident that he's still an ascending player and like will continue to get better, even if like the sacks will fluctuate from year to year. And so I think he's worth paying, but I think Baki's stance has stayed the same. And so until anything changes, I think they're gonna use the tag on him and then say that they're continuing negotiations through the July 15th ish deadline to get an extension done. But as of now, I don't think an extension will get done.
Was there anything he could have done to get paid by now? Like was there other short of breaking the NFL sack record? Was there anything else he could have done?
I think there was like no way he would have been paid if he broke the sack record because then like everyone in the league, honestly, not just Baki, would have been like, oh, like he just had a really good contract year. Like this is like a clear buyer beware, where we're not gonna pay him for that season. So I almost feel like I don't know. I don't know what he could have done.
I have no sourcing on this. But again, you go back to my combine story, the couple scouts I talked to. One guy said he thinks that, he'll probably get into, if he thinks that he would get on the open market if he was a free agent, at least $30 million per year. No sourcing on this. My guess is that's probably around what Allen's camp would ask for. Cap going up, etc. Just had a big year. That's a little bit more than what TJ Watt gets, but add in the cap going up, etc. I bet, again, no sourcing. This is just me guessing, throwing crap against the wall. The Jaguars are probably wanting to get him more to like the Montez Sweat number, $25 million. And $5 million a year, that's a difference, man.
That is a difference.
Would that make sense to you if that was where things are at right now?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I almost feel like I think when the Montez Sweat deal happened, like we both got on a podcast and we're like, literally just give Josh this Montez Sweat deal, like with a couple, like 2 million tacked on just to make it like a little bit better. And so now they kind of like miss their opportunity to do that.
Like Montez Sweat and Rashawn Gary are gonna look like great deals, because you're gonna see Hunter get paid, you're gonna see Allen eventually get paid.
Right.
Of course, you have Brian Burns, who is kind of in complete limbo right now. If you want to feel better about the Josh Allen situation, the Panthers have definitely handled the Brian Burns situation worse. I can say that much.
He's a better player too. Not to make a
You think so?
Yeah, I think Josh might be a better overall down to down type player, which is definitely very valuable. I just think I mostly said that because I think Burns is a better pass rusher.
Yeah.
But they're definitely still similar classes, extremely good young players. They definitely fumbled that one. So I kind of feel like unless something fluky happens with Burns and Daniil Hunter and whatever other edges are out there this offseason, unless something weird happens where they don't really get a lot of money and then Josh Allen's camp is kind of I guess we kind of have to go back to the Montez Sweat deal. Maybe that could help out negotiations. But I think on the flip side, if Burns ends up getting a massive extension or Hunter ends up getting a ton of money, then that's really going to help Josh Allen's camp and hurt the Jaguars negotiators.
Yeah. And I don't think there are a lot of other edges that will determine things that much. Like Bryce Huff is a free agent. Yeah. He's really good, but he won't get any money that impacts them. Chase Young's a free agent. He won't get anything like that. I've seen some people say Jonathan Grenard could get 25, 26 million.
My guy, he's good, man. I'm not gonna say he's in the same tier as Brian Burns and Josh.
Oh, you're not.
He's pretty similar to
taking the lead there, but go on.
I think he's I'm not comping him to Trayvon Walker, but I think he plays a similar role as Trayvon Walker, where he's that underappreciated just edge setter at the strong side and does a lot of nitty gritty work that just really helps out all the defenders around him, and he can be even if he's not a Brian Burns or a Josh Allen who's racking up double-digit sacks per year, hypothetically, he can give you 7 or 8 sacks a year, and then you have if you have a bona fide number one pass rusher on the other side, then that's a pretty good hookup. So I'm interested to see where he lands because again, more of like the Trayvon Walker strong side mold than like Josh Allen, Yannick Ngakoue, weak side edge rusher.
If Grenard gets 25 per year, I'd imagine that would throw a nice little wrench into negotiations with.
Yeah, because Grenard is like, he's like hasn't really been like very productive at all. So it actually will be pretty interesting to see like what his camp is able to get.
His profile is weird. He went 1 sack, 8 sacks, 1 sack, 12.5 sacks. So he's a weird one. All right, let's move on to the next player. Cam Robinson. Maybe I'm being gaslit. Maybe everybody's being gaslit when they say the expectation is he'll be back, because they're also saying stuff like, "Oh, he's under contract. Why would you even ask about him? You just cut Foley Fatukasi." I mean that's obviously a player being under contract has never once meant he's guaranteed to be back the next year. So that was a funny, little nugget they added in there. But both Trent Baalke and Doug Peterson, they expected Cam Robinson to be back. Is that your expectation? How surprised are you? I'm surprised because they obviously think Cam's better than Walker Little.
Yeah,
I mean they've played Cam over him over and over and over again. I was surprised because if you were looking for cost savings this free agency, so you could be aggressive and so you could maybe go toe to toe with the market to keep your own guys. Releasing Cam was one of their cleanest moves. Would have saved them almost $20 million. But it seems like they'd rather have, at least in their comments, Cam Robinson than that $20 million. What's your read on that?
Yeah, before the combine, I was pretty 50-50 on whether Cam was going to be a Jag next year, but I was leaning more that he was not going to be, just because, like you said, it would have been a really clean cut. Like they would have had only $4 million roughly in dead cap. It would have saved over $17 million.
They have 9 in dead cap for Fatukasi.
Yeah, that's crazy. I still don't understand that. Like I feel like the Fatukasi move came a little bit early, and they're making a little bit of money, a little bit of room for a possible Ridley deal.
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about both of those at the same time. I know I just went to Cam Robinson, but obviously they released Foley Fatukasi today. Mm-hmm. They saved $3.5 million in cap space. They eat a little over $9 million dead cap. I know if you post June 1st him, that's a little bit less dead cap, but you don't get the money at the start of the league year anyway, so it's kind of a moot point, regardless. It was always obvious that they kind of had to release him. I mean, he was set to be the 5th highest paid player on the team, and there's just no universe where a well-managed team goes into a season like that. Mm-hmm. I think Demetrius Harvey said he's played 47% of the snaps last 2 seasons, so it does create a hole, on the roster. I think an expected hole, because I don't think anybody really expected him to be back. So you obviously have to find somebody to fill those snaps. Tyler Lacey can fill some of them, obviously not all of them. It was pretty clearly a free agency, swing and a miss. And it goes back to another thing Baalke has said time and time again this offseason about physicality and how he thinks they need to be more physical. You built the sandwich, my friend. He's the one who signed, Foley Fatukasi. Right. You go back to their comments where they talked about him after they signed him, they think he has something that he could bring as a pass rusher. 1.5 sacks, 5 quarterback hits over the last 2 years. I think, I don't think Foley's a bad player. I think he's a playable, obviously, a run defender, can be a solid run defender who they paid to be a better player than he is. Obviously, you mentioned it, the money. I would think this move happens because they're trying to create some breathing room for the fact that you're probably about to get that tag number that you have to, at the very least, add into your cap number. Plus, if Ridley's about to, get offers on the 11th, you want as much money as you can to kind of, come back with a compatible offer. Is that basically your read on why, the move maybe happen now?
Yeah, because I think Rayshawn Jenkins is another one that is a expected hole, and then his role will get filled by Antonio Johnson next year is the assumption. But I think it's fair to assume that Rayshawn Jenkins is going to get cut. But I would have thought that their cap casualties would have happened all in a row, sort of, rather than spacing them out. And so I was definitely caught a little bit off guard when I saw Foley's name today, and it's not like there's been like any other like big like cap casualties today. It's not like you look around the league and like other teams are doing the same thing. And so I think in terms of like the pre June 1st and post June 1st, I think you're right. We're like either way, whichever way you designate it, like the money won't be affected until like the new league year. But like basically the reason you do a post June 1st designation is to just like save more in the future.
Yeah, for basically the regular season.
Yeah. And so like basically like it's like the money isn't like that big of a deal. It's just that the timing is the most interesting part of it, and that like they're freeing up money right now rather than freeing up a little bit more money down the line.
Yeah.
So that's I put up the Brian Windhorst double finger.
Why do they need this money
right now? What's happening?
Yeah, makes sense. So that's one of the bigger moves that they've made. Like Fadakasi, it always seemed like one of the obvious ones, and it's not just money related. They internally they didn't really like they felt like they could have gotten more probably out of him. Like they feel like it was a miss, obviously, in free agency. He wasn't the player that they hoped that they would be getting. So that some of that goes into it too. That brings us back to Cam. Like I feel like entering the offseason, the four most obvious financial like moves to make cut wise, it was Cam, Sheriff, Fadakasi,
Rayshon Jenkins.
Yeah, Rayshon Jenkins. And then obviously Darius Williams is like a super clean cut, but
yeah,
we'll talk more about the cornerback position in my victory lap a little bit later. So oh man, I was surprised when they said that they expected Cam to be back, honestly. I felt like Trent kind of teed up after the season, after his press conference, where he was asked about Cam, and his answer was like, "We need to have tough conversations." I felt like that was kind of preluding a potential move. So I'll be honest, I was surprised.
I also think that like Trent and Doug have talked about, but especially Doug, how like in terms of the offensive line woes from last year, how like Doug brings up all the time, like we didn't have like a consistent lineup, and like we only had one game, and it was the regular season finale of like our full starting lineup, and there was just a lot of moving pieces, this and that. And so I thought that was kind of a sign that like they were unhappy with Cam getting suspended for 4 games, and then he's had like 1 or 2 minor injuries that have just nicked him up over the past year or two. And so I thought they were going to like move on to Little, even though Little also got nicked up last year. It was at guard. So I was kind of expecting, plus like the fact that the offensive tackles just / offensive line class in the draft is so strong this year. I kind of thought it would make a lot of sense if they cut Cam, took the savings, had Anton and Little be the 2024 starters, and then they would have like a day 2-ish offensive tackle be their swing tackle, and then like the 2025 tackle opposite Anton Harrison would basically either be that day 2 pick or Walker Little on an extension. But no, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
So like I was 50-50 before the combine, but more so leaning that Cam was going to get cut. But then like after the combine happened, I definitely think he's staying, because I don't think, even though like you said, I think it was notable the way that I think even Trent and Doug both said like, oh well, he's on the roster right now, so like what are you talking about? That was kind of weird. But at the same time, like they both also said like positive and good things about him, and said like they like having him around. And like I feel like, I mean, the Jaguars did post happy birthday to Foley Fatukasi on Twitter today, hours before cutting him. But I don't think that like Team Brass would go out and say like, hey, we like this player, and then cut him a week later. That seems.
Trent loves Cam Robinson. Trent has loved Cam Robinson since before Doug Peterson was even, with the Jaguars. Like Cam is a Trent bulky player and guy, and I think him being like the nasty guy of the line obviously has a lot to do with that. Did you listen to Doug's other press conference, which is like at these combines, so at these combine scrums, it's scrums for literally anybody. So for whatever reason, you get a bunch of random people from so many other outlets and teams who don't need anything from Doug Peterson or Trent Baalke asking questions to Doug Peterson and Trent Baalke. So normally the team
that's why you get 3 hardball questions.
Yeah, exactly. So, and somebody asked Doug Peterson about like Green Bay's history of developing quarterbacks. I'm just like, dude, get the hell out of here! Like,
no, Demetrius was down there up there in Indianapolis, and so he was saying that like for the main press conference, like he didn't even ask any questions, and he just saved it for the scrum. And he had, I forget what they were off the top of my head, but he had 2 great questions during that scrum. But go ahead with whatever you were going on with.
So you did hear like Doug's like scrum with local media. He kind of went in on Cam. Like he said how much he liked him, but he also like I'll pull up the exact quote. Like more or less called like him missing 4 games. He basically more or less like said it was BS, etc.
Yeah, that's why he was like, "Oh yeah, Cam has to understand that he's got to be available."
Yeah. Let's see. Somebody asked him if he expects Cam to be back. He goes, "I hope so." As an organization, I mean, he's under contract, and I just think that Cam brings an edge. Cam brings some physicality to the offensive line. He has to. He's like Trevor. He has to understand that hey, his role is to help this team win. He can't put the team, can't put the players, can't put us in situations that he did last year. Now the injury is out of anybody's control, but talking about the suspension and it's about being a pro. And listen, these are conversations that Cam, he's had and we've had. I definitely like having him on the team. He's fun to be around, brings a lot of energy out there, and it makes us better. It sounds like him kind of like slapping him on the wrist a little bit, but also sounds like, hey, this guy's going to be on the team, at least to me.
I think, like, because obviously, like, Balky and Peterson have to talk about the player, like, if they're both asked about the player. But I think they both said enough good things about him that I think he'll be on the team. Like, I think they both easily could have, like, deflected the question and made it more of, like, an offensive line as a whole question. Because, like, Balky did that, like, a couple of times in his past 2 availabilities, I guess, where like I feel like he got asked about like Luke Fortner specifically, and then like kind of mentioned his name, but then really like turned into a discussion about the offensive line in general. Yeah. And so I think that like they both could have done that, like could have like taken a Cam question and turned it into something else, but instead they addressed it directly enough that he's a Jag.
Yeah, and really doesn't seem like Walker Little's ever going to get a season to start.
God, man. Holy cow.
I almost say throughout his entire last season, like other than like the first 4 games, he started at tackle, which he did really well because like just being moved back and forth from guard tackle obviously had an impact on him. That pick in hindsight has looked just crazy. Like while you're picking a tackle, you have no intention of ever like playing in the top 50. But I think you can confidently say after those that they have their tackles between Cam, Walker, and Anton. And it's funny because you mentioned the tackle class. This tackle class is insane. there will be a player at 17 who can be a day 1 starting tackle. So they could have gone, maybe even that route. That seems obviously less likely now. All right, let's move on to the next player of interest, Ezra Cleveland. Yeah, Trent said they traded for him for a reason. They were meeting with his agents also last week. It seemed like a theme. He's a Jaguars free agent. Trent wants him back. It seems to like more or less be all you like. No, team's not far off. You're a free agent. You're coming back. We have some young guys we're going to pay. Everything's okay. Everything's fine. That seems to me like what the Ezra Cleveland thing is. It always felt like they would want him back. I mean, Phil Rauscher obviously loves the guy after being his coach in 2 different stops. It never seemed like the Jaguars were okay with using a 6th-round pick as a rental for a half a season of, guard play / playing tackle for 1 game. I'm in the opinion that I don't think he's like that good. I think this is a really deep both guard draft and interior offensive line, like free agency in general. Like there's what Jeremy Fowler said. There's like 4 or 5 guards who might all get $16 million per year, on the open market. Ezra is like a mid-tier guard, like in this year's class. It seems like they prefer to re-sign him. I think that number, what would be the sweet spot to you? Like 7 to 8 million would sound right, but I'd guess he'd get close to 10.
Yeah, because I like anything below that, like 5 or 6, like I don't really see a player with like 4 years of NFL starting experience getting that little, and he's been I think he got nicked up a little bit last year, but he's been pretty healthy throughout his career, and he was a tackle coming out of college, so even though he's like an NFL guard really, hypothetically, he's got a little bit of versatility to him. But yeah, I'm pretty sure PFF's Brad Spielberger projected him to get 9.5 million per year for 3 years. And it seems a little rich to me. Even like with a lot of guards expecting to get paid this year, it was like I was a little underwhelmed by Cleveland last year. And again, I think he did like suffer an injury pretty quickly after like going into the Jaguars'
He did.
lineup. But I remember like when the trade first happened with Minnesota, I was pretty mad about it. Like it was just a 6th rounder for uh like a borderline backup. But then I flicked on the film, John, and I really liked what I saw from Ezra when he was in Minnesota. And maybe a little bit of that was like some Kevin O'Connell magic, some Kirk Cousins magic. I don't know. Maybe this scheme helped him out a little bit, but I came away from the film more encouraged than originally. But then the film last year wasn't really as encouraging, and so I think if the Jags sign him to be like a high end backup, maybe a low end starter, then I'm totally okay with that. But if they're signing him to like $10 to $12 million a year, like you should either you like it wouldn't make sense to do that because I feel like you should either pay another $4 million and get like a Mike Wendu or I don't know, Jonah Lewis,
Kevin Dotson, Jonah Jackson.
Jonah Jackson.
Yeah, Kevin Dotson's probably going to get a good amount. Robert Hunt from Miami.
Right.
He's
So if you're gonna give like Cleveland 11 million, like you might as well just pay all the way up for a really good starter, or pay all the way down for like I don't know, like what Ezra basically was last year, which was a buy low. And so I honestly came away from the combine thinking that like yes, Balky wants all the guys back for sure, but I thought he was like a little bit less enthusiastic talking about Ezra compared to Calvin and Josh. Because with Calvin, he's like, "Oh, I love that guy. He's all ball," and with Josh, he's like, all business. Like, "Oh, like we're gonna get something done at the right time. Like we're in talks and meeting with his agent." And then with Ezra, I don't know. Like he's had like the same time of like general manager speak, but it just didn't seem as enthusiastic to me. And he also said like we'd like all of our players back. That's the way we roll. Unfortunately, you can't get them all back. And so I think he kind of like said that side of the coin, like when talking about Ridley and Allen too. It's not like that, and even Cam, like it's not like that was the first time that he said we want everyone, but we can't bring everyone back. But I don't know. That was kind of like my hot takeaway is that like I'm not as convinced as I think a lot of other people are that Cleveland is going to be a Jaguar next year.
you're not wrong that he was less enthusiastic, but I would also say I too would be less enthusiastic talking Ezra Cleveland compared to Calvin Ridley and Josh Allen.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you. All right, next two. Travis Etienne / Tank Bigsby. We mentioned it earlier. Doug Peterson talked to Matthew Berry of NBC Sports. He said that Tank will have a bigger role next year. He was asked like directly about Etienne having so many touches. I think he had the 3rd most touches in the NFL. And he said that's not like by design. We want to knock that down. Is there going to be more of a split between Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby next year? And how much of that split is going to be, we drafted this guy in the 3rd. We literally have to play him so we don't look like idiots?
I think it's kind of like both. I think it's that, and then it's also like we drafted Travis Etienne in the 1st round. Like we have to like have someone else taking some of the workload off of him so that we don't just like run this guy into the dirt before his 4th NFL season. And I know that's kind of like the trend with running backs in the NFL is to like use them up on the rookie contract and then just draft another one. But ETN is like such a special talent that he could like, even though he hasn't made it his first career Pro Bowl, I think bar injury, he's definitely got multiple Pro Bowl appearances like in his future or in his potential or whatever. And so I think that he is like the kind of back that's not a Derrick Henry workhorse, like where you don't want to give him 20 touches. Like I think he's pretty comparable to Tony Pollard. I feel like I've made this comp before where like Pollard and Zeke Elliott were like had a really nice thunder and lightning approach 2 seasons ago. And a lot of people were clamoring for Pollard to start over Zeke because he was like more efficient technically, but Zeke was also like getting a lot of like the dirty work done between the tackles and helping to like kind of set up some of Pollard's more fancy kind of gadget stuff almost. And so I think that like ETN would certainly benefit from less of a workload. And like if he gets less volume, I think he would definitely be more efficient. But then like at the same time, I think you're right where it's like, yeah, we just drafted this guy in the 3rd round after moving up for a guy in the 4th round the previous year, and that already didn't work. And so I think like when Doug said that Tank is going to get a bigger workload this year, I think
it's not hard.
Yeah, well, there's that. I also think that like they're gonna just give him the workload that they were hoping to give him as a rookie, but then like they try to give him a workload as a rookie, and then they kind of like were forced to take the ball away from him.
He couldn't play passing downs.
Yeah, so like I think they're just like gonna go into 2024 like trying to execute the plan that they had for Tank in 2023.
It does seem like a great bit that their answers so far to improving last year's offense are play Tank Bixby more. That's about the only thing Doug has said that like to do differently is don't turn the ball over and we need to play Tank more. Like he hasn't said any new offensive line or anything like that. In fact, he said the opposite. He pointed out the fact that his ideal offensive line only played 1 game together. And I mean, about the offensive line, like the edges are obviously set. Ezra Cleveland, it looks like, is an option at left guard. Then you have question marks at center and right guard. We'll see what happens with Brandon Sheriff. He looks like another guy who's kind of a clear cut just in terms of the money that you save. He's still, I feel like he's one of the most underrated players, honestly. I feel like fans kind of rag on him. He's still a pretty good guard. He's not one of the best guards in the league anymore.
Yeah, it's all the expectations. It's similar to like Ridley too, where it's like if you think he's going to be like an all-pro, then like you're going to be disappointed. But he's actually a good player.
Yeah, and they're obviously paying the tax on his contract. He's their 2nd highest paid player right now. Obviously, that's not where he's at in his career in terms of what you get, but he's still a good player. So I'm interested to see what happens with him. I think Mark Long of the Associated Press kind of got everybody going to begin with on last Tuesday when he said more or less he didn't expect anything to happen with him. And then Luke Fortner, who they've mentioned bringing in competition for him before, and there's obviously been rumors and reports of them being interested in veteran centers. That makes more sense. Like if you want an offensive line to improve right away, when you want a veteran replacement for your struggling young center as opposed to another young center, so, but nonetheless, I mean, how do you view that? Do you think that they're going to just run it back with the same offensive line?
No, I don't know. The Sheriff thing is weird to me because I feel like before that Mark Long tweet, I was like definitely thought he was going to get cut, or I thought I was probably like 90-10 that he was going to get cut. And then I don't know, the Mark Long tweet got me all twisted up because I still think that he's more likely to get cut than not. Like I'm not going to completely flip my stance just based on 180 character post, but I don't know. It's a little bit more questionable. And I think like just as a whole, like the Jaguars would probably like to like bring back their guys, like return like the same guys that they had last year in terms of like starters and keeping continuity and stuff like that. But I just think from like a zoomed in perspective, when you look at Sheriff, it's just he's like not worth the contract he's being paid, even if he is a good player. And so I
feel like that's the main thing. Yeah. It's like there's just you're always going to overpay when you sign like marquee guys. Like you shouldn't be trying to get value in like the first crops of like free agents, and you shouldn't be trying to get value when you're re-signing your own guys. Like the value you should be getting is like when you sign like these mid-tier free agents and stuff.
Right. So they should Ezra Cleveland and like, I mean, I guess they're already going to sign center because that was probably like my biggest takeaway from the combine. It's just that I feel like before the combine there was kind of smoke or rumors or whatever that the Jags were interested in adding competition at center specifically, not just like the whole offensive line. And then I feel like Balky doubled down on that, where like he wants to get a veteran presence inside to compete with Fortner specifically. So if they're gonna like at left guard, they're either gonna re-sign Ezra or sign a different guard because like you don't want to have that be like a huge hole, and then they're gonna sign a center. And so like I feel like the chances that they sign 3 starting caliber interior offensive linemen in the same offseason are pretty slim. So I think it's going to end up being the offensive line is going to be Cam left tackle, Ezra left guard, veteran center signed for like $8 million at center. Right guard will be a camp competition between Cooper Hodges and a rookie, a top 100 picked rookie, and right tackle is Anton.
I think that makes sense. So won't be that different. It's like they were never going to overhaul like it completely. Like either way, some offensive tackles and some combination were going to return. All right, next topic to hit. Trent Baalke told Cameron Wolfe of NFL Network that they've started discussions on a Trevor Lawrence deal. I feel like some people really ran with it and took it the wrong way. I had several comments saying, "Why are you doing this before Josh Allen?" that's not what it means at all. Yeah, all it means is like they at least started the conversation. No deal would be imminent. I'd imagine if he did sign an extension this year, it would come like around like training camp, like Justin Herbert's came, so you can like just save the money. Moving ahead, and you can use any money this offseason that you need to, and where you're at. I mean, we've said it before, guys. I think it'd be smart to extend Trevor now, and the reason is like you're living it with Josh Allen. Like buy early and buy low when you know the player is good. And okay, is Trevor Lawrence like an elite top 3 quarterback? No, I think he's a great quarterback who I think I'd put like in the top probably like 6 to 7.
I was going to say top 8 to be safe, but agree about top 6.
Yeah, I know not a lot of fans wouldn't agree with us after how last year went, but we're the ball knowers here. They're the ones getting bulky balled by us, not vice versa. Right. So I like what's the other scenario? Like, are you not paying Trevor Lawrence? Like, are you gonna let Trevor Lawrence not be your quarterback? Because do that and frankly try to get a stadium approved. I would love to see that try to happen. Like, it'd be asinine. So if you're already gonna pay him regardless, it doesn't matter if you think he's a lead or not, whatever. They basically have already said he's gonna get paid one way or another. Why not just rip the Band-Aid off now and try to get in a little cheaper? Because I mean Dak's probably about to get paid. Obviously Kirk is about to do some things. With the market, like the market's going to look different. So from my perspective, if you're going to pay him, you might as well do it now. And any Jags fan who doesn't think they're going to pay him because they're frustrated that he fumbles too much, that's just not the case. Like he's going to get paid. They have no other avenue in the future other than Trevor Lawrence being their quarterback.
Yeah, I think I agree with you for sure. And I think like I don't even really want to talk about this. I just like I want to pay Trevor Lawrence and be done with this. But just for like the sake of devil's advocate, like I think that Baalke would be like scared of not the fumbles but the injuries and be like, we got to see him like get through a full season like healthier than he was last year, because like you don't like I think it's kind of silly to even bring up this hypothetical because like the chance of it happening is so small, and like you're just really like trying to talk yourself into an argument. But like knock on wood, if Trevor did suffer like a significant injury next year, then like you'd probably rather pay him next offseason with that like injury discount in mind than this offseason. But like that's still absolutely like even with like his 4 different injuries from 2023 in mind, like it's still a risk worth taking for the Jaguars is to like get in a contract with your franchise quarterback while it's like you can still get a good value, because it's not going to be good net value next year. He's going to get MVP votes.
It shouldn't be shocking to me, but it is shocking to me how many fans are out like, no, I wouldn't pay him right now.
What team do you root for? Have you watched for the past 2 decades? What sport do you care about? Oh my gosh. Just pay him. Just pay him. Just pay him. I'm so ready for this discourse.
I can tell you've had that pent up for a little bit.
It's been a long week without you, buddy.
No, I've missed you, my friend. I have done that. All right. we are shockingly going to break a second time. There you go. Yeah,
Oh,
three
this time,
different segments, baby. And then
jeez.
we'll be back to talk even more because there is more to unpack and there is more victory laps to be taken by yours truly. So we're going to cut for breaks and we'll be right back. Gus, have we ever had a 3-segment show?
No, I'm pretty sure that was in Jaguar Report history.
Yeah, look at us. That's what happens when we go on honeymoons. You should propose to your girlfriend and like get married like next week, and then have a honeymoon and come back and we'll do another long episode.
Yeah, it's been a pretty good episode so far. I feel like it's been a banger. I feel like for some reason I feel like since like week 17 or 18, since like the Jags were like really bad, like we've had some really good podcasting. I don't know why.
I'm better when I'm upset, and I don't get upset by them losing. I get upset by idiocy in my mentions, and when they lose, fans. Case in point, fans saying, "Why would you pay Trevor Lawrence now?" That's a pretty stupid thing to say. So. love you all, listeners. But you need to know when to eat your medicine and take your medicine. There you go. And I will be the one spoon feeding it to you with airplane sounds. Pay Trevor Lawrence. All right. On that note, all right, Gus. So you have to like sift through like what comments matter and what don't at the combine. But there were 2 things that I think both of us thought were pretty important that were said. The first one is obviously Doug Peterson was asked a couple times, honestly, about play calling and Press Taylor, and he said he hasn't decided yet who's calling plays, more or less, that he still has to evaluate it, and he still has to go through with it with Press. I read that as Doug's going to call plays again. If Press was going to call plays again, there'd be no conversation needed, no evaluation needed. You know what I mean? Like, if he's calling plays again, then why are you saying, "Oh, we have to talk about it"? Like, no, you would just say like it's the same, status quo, nothing's changing. He made some interesting comments. He said he got pulled away from some of it last year by stuff going on. He wouldn't say what it was. I read that as he thought he had to kind of maybe babysit the defense, which I mean, he fired the whole defensive staff, so he obviously didn't trust it.
Right.
Very much.
That was definitely my takeaway too. And so like it wasn't really like it was like more of a feel thing, but then like hearing you say the same thing.
It wasn't anything he said. That was just like my read, into it. He's mentioned before, like he mentioned on some podcasts during the season how he liked not calling plays to an extent because he felt like he could manage the game better, see it differently, which I believe. But also, why was Doug Peterson hired? It wasn't to be a CEO like overwatch the defense.
Right. Yeah.
It was to call plays. Like they hired him because just simple facts. He is a head coach again because he had a great little run there in Philadelphia where he was the play caller and where Carson Wentz and Nick Foles both went off in the offense. And I know Press Taylor called some plays during 2022. I know it because Doug Peterson loves mentioning it. So, but it was still Doug's show, even if Press called the plays in the second half, Doug was still pushing the buttons in the first half, etc. The entire reason Doug Peterson was hired was to call plays and develop Trevor Lawrence. And when you're not doing half of that, it's weird. It was weird to begin with that he didn't call plays last year. The entire thing didn't make much sense. I would assume, and again, this isn't me sourcing anything. I try to make it very clear when I'm reporting information I've been told. Haven't been told anything on this front. But if you're Shad Khan, are you not pulling Doug Peterson into your office this offseason and being like, come on, get real. Like, call plays next year, right?
I mean, at least someone has to. I don't know if it'll be Shad or if it'll be Tony. But yeah, like someone has to like be the grown up and tell Doug Peterson to start acting like a grown up for sure. Because like as you said, like that's the reason he got hired. And like I feel like almost not that like he hasn't been developing Trevor, but I feel like Trevor would develop more better if Peterson was the one calling the plays, because then you'll just have like kind of like more chemistry between the two of you. If it's like head coach and play caller and with quarterback as opposed to just head coach and quarterback, then you might as well be Mike Tomlin and Kenny Pickett.
I feel like it would have been different if Press had called plays in 2022 and then Doug called them in 2023. Like, because now you're entering year 3 of this regime. It's like, all right, crap or get off the pot time. Like, it's not time for you to develop your coaching tree. He mentioned last year how Press was still developing as an offense coordinator. Personally, I can respect that. I can respect you believing in somebody and wanting to see him grow in his role. But if you're the Jaguars, like, okay, do it on your own time, pal.
Yeah, exactly. Like with the Eagles, like at least he like won a Super Bowl. So then it was like understandable that like he wants to kind of like grow out his own coaching staff, let someone else take the reins a little bit, this and that. And then like but with the Jaguars, like yeah, sure that like 2022 second half run was pretty special, but they won one playoff game.
Yeah.
And then you like just saw the son like turn the keys completely over to Press. Seems or just was a little absurd. So I think it's good news for sure that the Peterson is unofficially taking back play calling.
I was going to say it.
Way.
Is your prediction that Doug calls plays next year? That's my feel.
Yeah, like shut it down or like not talk about it, but like the way that he skirted around it without completely skirting around it made it seem like he like is going to be the play caller, whether it's his decision or not.
And whether he even says, because I would very much doubt, but he'd come out and be like, Press doesn't call. Press has nothing to do with play calling anymore. Like at the very least, I'd imagine at the very least he'd be like it's a shared kind of thing. But we know Doug.
I feel like it won't even be official until like if like after week 1, someone asked him point blank who called plays today, and then he kind of like
he could still be coy about it.
He still could be coy about it, but like I feel like that would be like the first time that he like maybe feels like he has to give a straight answer. But
one of the worst weekly things last year was fans saying, "Oh, Doug looked like he was calling plays. He had his glasses on and stuff." So I'm looking forward to that being over. And when they'd have a good game and somebody'd be like, "It felt like Doug called plays this game." Like
that whole bit like of like Press being the scapegoat for like the first month or 2 months or whatever it was such a drag.
Yeah. All right. So we seem to be in agreement there. All right. The second most important thing, and I'm going to pull it up so I have it just right. It was music to my sunburned ears, guys. I don't think you understand how I guffawed. You know, I let out a yelp when I heard this. Trent Baalke on cornerbacks. God bless America, etc. He asked about who would be the third cornerback in the secondary. He said, that's a good question. Who is going to be the third? We've got to add to that group. I think Coach Nielsen spoke on it. Coach Peterson probably spoke on it. Now I'm speaking on it. It's a group we need to address. We feel good about the group we have. We feel like we've got some good young guys to work with. We got some veterans in there, but we're definitely looking to add to that group.
Dude, I don't know. This is crazy. Has a general manager ever like addressed their need like that before? Like, I feel like the only other circumstance would be like a quarterback where like the only guy you have on your roster is Uncle Rico. So like obviously you're gonna get a new quarterback in the coming offseason. And so like for the Jags perspective, like it is a little bit obvious that they're gonna add to cornerback, but like I did not think Baalke like needed to say that the way that he did. So that was it was unsurprising to me that Baalke like said, yeah, we need corners, but it was surprising to me the fact that he was like, yes, we need corners. You know?
Alexa, play Vindicated by Dashboard Confessional.
Yeah. You can take your victory lap. You've been for a long time.
So I had like somebody tweet at me and like during the combine and be like, I hope you're happy. And the whole fan base is frothing at the mouth for a cornerback now. And somebody was like, yeah, the media influence, etc. The general manager said it. Like I just had the foresight to be like, okay, it's pretty obvious they need cornerback help.
Yeah.
It was shocking how many people pushed back on it when they're saying, no, we don't need cornerbacks. We have 2 on the roster who have proven they can play in the NFL. You clearly need more than just Tyson Campbell and Darius Williams. They clearly think they need more. They don't have a starting slot corner on the roster. They don't have a backup slot corner on the roster with Trey Herndon set to be a free agent. And I don't want to hear Antonio Johnson because he was literally a sub-package run-stopping nickel corner last year.
Right.
I've never seen teams rotate corners like that on running and passing downs. I'm sure it's been done, but they wouldn't have done that if they like Antonio Johnson. He's just not a nickel guy. He's not going to be specifically in man coverage against slot receivers. He is a safety who can obviously play near the line of scrimmage and can do some things that nickels do, like blitz, fit against the run, etc. So I felt very vindicated. I throw out everything you want to say about the man zone, etc. scheme. I don't care. It was clear as day. This day the season ended, I didn't need cornerback help. It became even clearer when Ryan Nielsen was hired. And now the general manager is outright saying, yeah, we need cornerbacks. I don't think Doug Peterson has said it, so he pulled that out of nowhere. So that was my favorite part of the quote. Him saying that, and he's like, now I'm speaking on it. Like, to me, very much seemed like a general manager preparing his fan base for a cornerback to be taken at 17 overall. I'm not going to say they're going to take a position at 17 overall because every general manager lets the board breathe. Lets the board come to them. But I'd say if they had it their way, they're probably picking a cornerback at 17. And it is obvious why. And anybody who argued with me, I got a boot you can lick out there. All right, go ahead.
I agree with all that. And I think I almost, again, I'm like a little bit phased by like the way he put it. Like, I feel like it's a little bit of a smokescreen where like 100% their biggest need entering the offseason is quarterback. But like
it can't be a smokescreen. They only have 2.5 NFL quality cornerbacks on the roster. It can't be a smokescreen.
Here's my case. He said he was asked about the combine a couple times and like didn't really give anything interesting, except the one interesting he said about the combine was that like teams can kind of scout other teams as needs. And so like that was a big reason that the Jags were like big winners on day one of the draft last year, is that they did a really good job of trading back twice and still landing the guy they wanted, Anton Harrison. And a big reason that was able to happen is because like the Jags had a good idea of like what other teams' needs were, who they were going to take with like their first round pick if the Jags kind of like went behind them in the order. And so Baki was saying a little bit how like, oh, like, yeah, like the combine is dying a little bit, how like we saw like Marvin Harrison Jr. didn't do anything whatsoever. A lot of the quarterbacks didn't throw. There was a lot of players who were like clearly like training for the 40. Like that's been a trend for a few years, is that like players have kind of become like less heavy and a lot faster. And a big part of it is because like they're just training for the combine because it has such a big influence on draft stock. So again, like the takeaway that I had from his combine speak was just that like he's doing homework, or really every team is doing homework on like other teams' needs. So I almost feel like that cornerback thing like could have been a smokescreen. Don't get me wrong, you're definitely right on this, and I'm just galaxy braining over here. But like I think that like he was
smoke coming out of my ears.
To say like, oh, like we need a corner, so that other teams will think that they're going to take a cornerback round one, but then they're actually going to take a corner like round 2 or 3. Because he also said like he had that big cornerback like quote during his press conference, but then he was also talking about cornerbacks later in the draft, and he said, I think the draft at the corner position is going to be strong. I think it's a good group. I think there's going to be good players at the top end of the market and good players all the way through the developmental range. I think it's going to be a pretty good group of players in that specific position group. So he basically said that like it's like the class is really good from like the really good players at the top all the way down through the depth. And so I'm just saying, again, I agree that cornerback's the biggest need. You definitely have the right to victory lap. But a little tiny part of me is thinking, a little teeny tiny part.
What are you gonna do, brother?
Is thinking maybe they'll take a cornerback in the 2nd or 3rd round instead of the 1st. That's all.
Can I tweak the take?
Absolutely.
I'd say, yeah, lock in a cornerback within the first 3 picks. I don't think that comment means we're taking a corner at 17, but I think it's him admitting, John Shipley was correct. Corner is a massive need. Does that make sense?
No, yeah.
Because I could see them going in other directions at 17.
So, yeah, I think that's like a good kind of like dissimilarity or difference to make is that like he was saying that it's the biggest need, and that's what you were saying all along is that it's their biggest team need, and so like people are automatically just making the jump of like, oh, it's their biggest team need. That's the position that's going to be at number 17. So that's all I'm really trying to say is like slow down on who you're mocking at 17th overall.
You bet your ass they are. All right, so I thoroughly enjoyed it. It thoroughly made me like genuinely brought a smile to my face. So, all right, we'll move into our last little thing. All right, we've talked for about 90 minutes here. We haven't talked about a single player at the combine. So let's get in some combine takes. All right, you're sitting in the chair. All right, in the war room.
Oh, chair.
Yeah, you're selecting the player at 17 overall. I want a best case, a worst case, and a middle ground case after all we saw from the combine, because we saw some dude stocks go, way up. It seems like everybody tests well at the combine now. There were like 5 players who didn't test well. Enos Wakestraw was one of them. I know somebody reported that he was hurt and he'll test again, but basically, like universally, people test well at the combine now. Like the RAS stuff, like I do think it's valuable, but more often than not, players are going to hit like 8.5 or higher. It's not like if you're like in the 7 range now, like you're no longer like a good athlete. So with that in mind, there were some guys who definitely caught like Brian Thomas running that. Like I've said before, I don't feel good about selecting a guy like I like wouldn't just that profile at 17. But after the way he ran, like he's probably a top 20, pick. Some dudes like tested crazy, like Braden Fisk might be like a top 50 player, and he was 23 years old and playing for Western Kentucky a year ago. So it's some crazy stuff. So I'll go ahead and give you mine. So okay, go ahead and let's see. Best case.
All right.
Kenyon Mitchell from Toledo. I think his 40. Like, what is there bad about him as a prospect? He tested crazy. 4.33 40 or whatever. He has a ton of production. He obviously has good tape. He had a really strong Senior Bowl if you want to see him against even better, competition. So production, testing, tape. He literally hits every check every mark. I think he'd be the perfect best case scenario if he fell to 17. I'm not sure he does now because for all those reasons I just listed, he has the profile of a guy who might go closer to 10th overall. And with this specific corner class, I'd imagine if you pulled 10 GMs, you'll get 5 or 6 different names as the top cornerback. People are just gonna corners and wide receivers are like ice cream now. Everybody's gonna have their biases and their favorite flavors. The middle case, I'd go one of the offensive tackles or one of the 2 defensive tackles, whether that be Byron Murphy or Jason Newton. I think there's a good chance that when the draft happens and they're sitting at 17th overall, that an offensive lineman is the best player available. They clearly, if you took a tackle now, he's not playing tackle in 2024. But I don't think it'd be a bad move to take one of these really good tackles and play him at guard for at least a year, maybe replace Brandon Sheriff or replace Ezra Cleveland. Worst case, you know where I'm going with this. Worst case scenario. JPJ. That would be an absolutely criminal selection, I think. I honestly think it would harm people if they took a center and I'll say it, not just any center. I'm not convinced he's the best center in the draft.
Yeah, we've talked about this. We're if it's Tyler Linderbaum, who's clearly the best center in the draft, maybe you spend a late first round pick on him. But there's definitely not how this guy.
Yeah, Linderbaum went in the 20s. Frank Ragnow went in the 20s. Is JPJ better than either one of them? No, he's not.
I don't even know if he's better than Graham Barton or Zach Frazier. It depends on who you ask.
I don't think he is. I'll be honest with you guys. My personal opinion, I don't think he is. I know, again, if you ask 10 different offensive line coaches, you'll get different answers. He's not. It'd be different if he was the unanimous top center. It'd be different, but he simply is not. Jaguars fans have turned him into the most hyperbolic draft prospect of my lifetime.
Yeah.
It's weird. Just Jaguar fans specifically. I admit, I'll have Miami Dolphins fans too. I've seen some Miami Dolphins fans want to take him pretty early, but that's because I think he said in an interview he was a Dolphin fan growing up. So I'll give them that. But
Yeah.
Jaguars fans make it talk about they'd be passing on Jeff Saturday, and I just do not think that is the case, dude. I don't. So worst case scenario, a center / JPJ at 17. There's just zero scenario where center is the best player available at 17 in this draft.
Yeah.
This draft is full of freaks at offensive tackle, at corner, at wide receiver. Some edge rushers will be pushed down. There are probably 4 quarterbacks going in the first 16 picks. There is genuinely zero scenario where a center is the best player available at number 17 overall. I just want to grab Jaguars fan base by the collar and shake them, Gus. It would be an absolutely abysmal pick. It'd be one of the worst picks of the draft. Not just the first round. It would be one of the worst picks of the draft. And I think if you make that pick, you can go ahead and just say, okay, where the hell is this season going? Because they're not a first-round center away from being a good team. They need to upgrade center. This is one of the strongest center free agency classes I've ever seen. Dude, there's like 7 or 8 starting centers about to hit free agency. We just talked about there's 3 centers alone who are going to go in the top 100 between Barton, Fraser, and JPJ, and then you have the Georgia guy who has another potential one. I feel like I'm going crazy, Gus. Like, why are people still talking about a center, Gus? Make it stop. Make it stop.
It's like he's such a popular like first round mock guy. Like even if he wasn't mocked to the Jaguars, like I think every Jaguars fan who was like reading mocks saw his name in the first round. They were like, oh well, we really despise Luke Fortner with everything we've got, and so here's like plug and chug. I think
it's got to be. If you want to point to one thing about Luke Fortner's career and why it hasn't hit so far, it's that fans are obsessed with taking an okay center at 17th overall. That's how bad Luke Fortner's been. No, I'll take it back. Fans aren't okay with it. Fans are obsessed with it. It's bothersome, Gus. It is bothersome. I am concerned, and I'm trying to help. And I've been made out to be the bad guy about it, and I'm the only one making any sense here.
No, I'm with you.
It's genuinely bothered me if you can't.
Yeah. We've gotten to that point a couple times already in this podcast. I guess that's what happens when we go over 90 minutes. This is definitely sending a PR for us.
I could have opened with this.
This is what you've been waiting for the whole week.
I was explaining it to the wife on our honeymoon. That gives you the extent of it. Because it was like there was like a couple hour period where I was actually working, and that was because of them talking and tweeting, and I made several tweets about a center, and she was like, "What are you talking about?" And I had to explain to her, like, "No, this very meaningless and objective thing is important to me." So there you go. I've become so it's like the venom, like Sidnico. It's taken me over inside and out. I've become so obsessed with fighting back against this narrative that I talked about it while in the middle of the ocean. So with that said,
we squashed it. Now just let it go. The argument's no more. You won it. You came out on top. JPJ, not going to be a first round pick, I don't think. Certainly shouldn't be a Jaguar, or at least in the first round.
Gus, it's not over till he retires. I'm letting you know that right now. I'm taking his entire career. I'm taking this fight with me, and it has nothing to do with him at all.
Poor guy. All right, I agree with you. Where I think like a center prospect or JPJ would be worst case. The one I wrote down was Jerzon.
You can call him Johnny.
He's projected to go in like the 20s of the first round, whereas fellow defensive tackle Byron Murphy is expected to go like 10 to 15-ish range. And so I think the Jags are just like a tweener kind of like which first round defensive tackle prospect they can get. And so like if Murphy falls to them, I think that'd be a cool pick. But I think if the Jags take Newton at 17, that would be a reach. And they would be – it's not even like about positional value really, because I think like a really good defensive tackle would be like a real difference maker for the Jaguars and for Ryan Nielsen's defense. It's more so about like the strength of the class. Yeah. I think that like you could find – like you would be way better off finding a defensive tackle in round 3 and then like just a less deep position. Like, I don't know. What would be a good example?
Like, I will say, them cutting Fadakasi like today, I do think should put the fan base on notice that, hey, it might be a defensive tackle at 17. And that's one, like, when we were talking about, I wouldn't lock in a corner at 17. Defensive tackle is one of the positions I think they could legitimately go with, dude. I
Yeah,
mean,
I wouldn't be surprised. I just think that Murphy would be a good pick, and Newton at 17 would be just a little bit too rich for me.
I get what you're saying. You're saying you don't want to take the second best defense tackle in the class in the top 20.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's
I'd
great.
rather take like the 5th best defensive tackle in the 3rd round. I feel like that just makes a lot more sense value wise. And I think the Jags have a pretty good like pulse on that too. Like another part of like the Anton selection last year was that like they knew there was kind of like a run on offensive tackles. And then even like with Brenton Strange, like I know that was an absurd pick, but like there was a big run on tight ends, and so they were kind of like, we need to get a tight end now rather than waiting around. So I think this year, like you can wait around for a defensive tackle, even though Newton is like an awesome player and an awesome prospect and would be a great fit. I just that if it's Newton at 17, I would be a little bit disappointed on draft night.
All right. Give me a medium case.
Medium case, trade up for Brian Thomas.
Okay.
I've Dane Bregler said that like he expects him to be a top 15 pick following the combine because
Makes sense.
he didn't break the 40-yard dash record like Xavier Worthy out of Texas did, but I think arguably Brian Thomas's 40 time was more impressive because of like the size that he had. And so like he was definitely like one of the winners of the combine, and I think that like the Jaguars could use speed as much as they could use size at the wide receiver position, because like obviously like you have some speed in like Kirk and Ridley if he stays, and Zay Jones, like they all hypothetically can produce downfield, but they're not like downfield like vertical true threats. And so I think like having someone like that, someone like Brian Thomas who like truly takes the top off of defenses would be pretty beneficial.
I would say if they lost Ridley in free agency, the biggest thing they would need is a deep threat on offense, because right now, like Ridley is by far and away their only deep threat, I'd say.
Yeah, like Zay Jones is like, I feel like he's like the only time he's actually a deep threat is like on double moves and stuff where like he kind of almost gets like set up by the scheme. So I think even though like yes, certainly the Jaguars need to add size to their room, especially when you just look at the receivers on the roster, like they could use some speed too. And so I think Brian Thomas is not going to make it past the Colts at 15. And so I tweeted a mock draft the other day where I had the Jags trading 17th and then their 4th round pick from the Saints that they had gotten last year's draft to trade up to 14th overall, which is the Saints.
Are you trading a 3rd and 4th round pick to move closer to the top 10 for Rome Odunze?
Yeah, a 3rd and 4th round pick. Absolutely.
That's what the Saints gave up to move from like 16 to 11
for Olave. Really?
Yeah, I'm probably horribly wrong on that.
I think the Olave deal was like pretty absurd, honestly. I think they gave up like 2 firsts to get Olave, and everyone was like, that's like kind of a brutal trade, but Olave is so cool that we're just not going to mention it. So yeah, I think that like Odunze, I would be pretty shocked if he was like available past 9 or 10. And so again, I think Brian Thomas is just like kind of like makes sense for both their needs, like how the draft is going to shake out in the first round, or at least like the tell that I have on it right now, like strengths and weaknesses of each position group in the class. I think trading up with a 4th round pick to get like a real explosive weapon for Trevor Lawrence would be worth it. So that's my middle ground.
So the Saints gave up 16, 98, and 120 to move up to 11.
Seems like a lot.
Would you do that for Odunze?
Say it one more time.
Okay. 16, 98, and 120. So late 3rd, early 4th, and swapping 1st round picks. Would you do that? So trade the Jags 3rd round compensatory pick and their original 4th round pick in addition to swapping first? Would you do that to grab a Dunze?
I would for Ndunze, but not Brian Thomas, because I think
Okay.
honestly, like I'm not even like the biggest fan of Odunze. Not that I don't like him, it's just that like I'm not like completely sold on him. Not that I'm not completely sold on him. Like I would do it for Odunze because I think he has like an outrageously high floor as a prospect. I think he's got a really high ceiling too, and could like certainly be a Hall of Famer. But I think he's kind of similar to Olave, where it's like these guys are ready to contribute on passing offenses, like not from year one, but from day one. And so I think it would be worth that kind of capital to trade up for like a high floor guy like a Odunze
Yeah.
rather than like an explosive guy like Brian Thomas.
Yeah, if they lose Ridley and did a deal like that for Dunze, I wouldn't knock it. I'd understand it. All right, give me your best case.
Sorry. My best case would be Troy Fautano or
Okay.
just like best available offensive lineman, because I think that like we've heard a lot in recent days, especially after the combine, about how good this offensive line draft class is. But I think it's like different from the receiver class, where like the receiver class is sick, but there's like so many options that like I think teams like even like the Jaguars might be like, oh, we're gonna pass on Brian Thomas in the first round and like go get uh, a different guy in the second or third round because there's so much depth. And not that the offensive line doesn't have impressive depth, but it's just that the top of the offensive line class is so outrageously talented that I think there's going to be like a pretty big run on that position.
I
And
agree.
so I think like the best case for the Jags is that like a really good tackle who can play either tackle or guard. So like Fautana or Fuaga, I think are like two college tackles who are like kind of like been whispered about as like potential guard transitions at the NFL level. And so I think if you get like one of those two guys that's like arguably should be a top 12 pick and then they fall to you, and then you could either have them be your swing tackle in 2024 and or like a starter at guard. And then like walk away with just like a really good offensive line prospect in the first round and then kind of like fill in some of your other needs like quarterback and receiver on day two, then that would be pretty nice.
Yeah, there will definitely be feels like a stupid comment to say because it's a 17th overall pick in the class, and there are always at least 17 good players. But there will be a very good player for them at 17. There are too many receivers, too many offensive linemen, too many cornerbacks. Like there are so many dudes right now who are rumored to be top 15 locks that somebody is going to slide to 17, and then add in Michigan, Brock Purdy potentially going, in the top 16, and that's what you get. So, Gus, we've packed a lot into this. I feel like it'd be advantageous for us to be back next week for arguably the biggest week that's not the draft and free agency. So we'll be back sometime next week to do a little preview for free agency. Talk about obviously the Jags' big free agents and some maybe potential fits that we see across the board. But I mean, nearly a 2-hour episode. I missed you guys. I hope you enjoy it. I apologize for becoming irate over fan base's desire to draft a specific center, but I am who I am.
Never change.
I believe Popeye said that.
Well, congrats again, Mr. Shipley.
You're next. Yeah. Yeah. What? Why don't we do that for 100th episode? You propose on air.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Why don't we do that?
All right. No, that works. I might not be able to record next week or the next several weeks after that. But yeah, no, that sounds good.
No, you still have to record. No, I appreciate you guys for listening to the 91st episode of the JaguarReport podcast. Gus, you got anything for us before we boogie on out of here?
It's almost 2 hours. We don't have to hit the mark. We'll see you next week.
Yeah. I don't know. We could make uncomfortable conversation for another 11 minutes.
I know we could.
I was about to say, I know I can do that. All right. Thank you guys for listening. And don't forget, Indianapolis, you've been bulky bold. Don't mess with the bull. You'll get the horns. All right. We'll be back next week.